with your deception. Keep it real, that's a profession. Like the whole world is pretending. Found the truth around the penguin. Get a gang on with a blessing. All the other gang is stressing. RPSC on a nesting. Only real one's gonna get this. Fake ones don't accept this. They can miss the message. Timbuktu got bodies, yeah. Find them in our wreckage. Auto hosting message. Squad to represent. Killing you with knowledge, yeah. The op is getting dirty. Oh, you're so effective, cause we're so effective. Let go of your worries, yeah. The whole thing is a setup. We got it and we get it. Offering refreshment. Level up your conscience, yeah, it's honestly the essence. This wave is uncontainable, facts are undebatable. You lanes are unrelatable, give a fuck about saving you. We could keep on playing you, you just keep complaining too. Game is unescapable, unless you're with the gang or no.
Messing with the penguin, we're messing with the penguin. Messing with the penguin, messing with the penguin. Messing with the penguin, messing with the penguin, messing with the penguin, fucking with the penguins, yeah, with the penguins. I'm coming with a vengeance, trying to make you come to your senses. Forget the general consensus, just pay attention. You move to have paid with good intentions. I'm clenching, my back wrenching, representing always the most superior, independent media. We got that real shit fucking encyclopedia. We're bringing an end to this mass hysteria. They wanna know why it's so serious, cause you must be delirious. If you're still believing stuff, get a grip and show some evidence for your own claims. We don't play no games, we stay relentless, exposing those events. Quick, the IPS are making an entrance, busting doors down, cause now's the time for interventions that I mentioned. We're affecting so many men across the spectrum. We stand out from the crowd, we don't blend in. Steady gaining tremendous momentum, there's nothing close to resembling. Check the emblem, it's a penguin, not a gremlin. Just letting you know you're on an infinite plane, it's never bending. We strike like temping, killing all fears and breaking the tension. Gotta know the hopes on me, digging deep in the trenches. Come and join in, be adventurous. Quit being so sensitive, forget the censorship. We ain't telling fibs. Messing with the penguin, we're messing with the penguin, 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 fucking with the penguins, yeah.
Okay, thank you for joining. I just sent out live stream notifications. It is 8/24/2023, 8:40 p.m. Mountain Time. We just got Donald Trump's mugshot, and I'm frankly underwhelmed, and it looks to me like they took multiple shots, so it's even less impressive. And I'm looking at the rogues gallery of Republicans, or the accused insurrectionists, including the Kraken herself, Sidney Powell. And it's like a rogues gallery of these Republicans just grinning at the camera, and I'm realizing this is like the new, in many ways, this is like the new swatting. This is just another way for the right-wing Republican grift party, which is what they've become, to capitalize on their fame and get a lot of attention. And all publicity is good publicity. It's something of a truism, and I think in this case it's certainly true, because look how they're already marketing and trying to, in fact, they're even trying to create memes out of it, in the sense of let's make it viral. All right, let me go through your comments. Joined by Nicotramus, Roxy W, Peace Circle 360, 737 says, please sir, can I have some more IPS? Yeah, and tonight we actually have a review to go over. I watched Barbie for the occult subtext, and it's certainly there. Rocco Calzone is here, an hour before dinner. Glad we can make it on time. I'm trying to maintain this same schedule. And you can find us live on TuneIn, on Paranormal Radio, radio.net, and a few other places. Joined by Kamala says the Earth is round, first proven by Galileo. I think they give credit to ancient Greeks. The ancient Greeks that saw boats go over the hump of water. They get the credit. Argument from ancient Greeks. Now, I'm not sure if we're going to have phones on tonight. It's all a matter of whether or not I can guess my password on the fly here. Rocco says, what a dog and pony show. Well, absolutely. Between the, I guess you call them debates. I mean, the only good thing about it is that Vivek commented on the fakery involved in the climate scam, but they never go far enough. People are so impressed, like, oh, this guy's real. He's calling the climate hoax a hoax. It's like people have been calling it a hoax since it was still global cooling. If he says NASA's a hoax, we can't trust NOAA, yeah, then he'll have my attention. Now, Kamala in the chat here is a round earther, and I know a lot of round earthers. I was never a round earther. I was a sphere earther. It never occurred to me that the Earth was a literal circle. I always assumed it was a sphere. By the way, anyone care to guess what shape the solar system is? A lot of people, especially believers in the conventional heliocentric model, think of the solar system as like an atom, like spherical with planets buzzing all around the central light source. But no, actually, your solar system is flat as a pancake, with the exception of Pluto, if you even want to call Pluto a planet. I mean, that's kind of a designation it hasn't quite earned. You know, Pluto was first noticed or included as a planet in 1930, the same year that Pluto the dog, the Disney dog, was invented. And if you look at Pluto and the shadow on it, the shape of this dark mass on Pluto, it actually quite literally looks like Pluto the dog. And I'd say you can't make this stuff up, but actually you can. And they do. And in addition to the Pluto the dog, you got Mickey Mouse on Mercury. You've got the Mimas, moon of Saturn, that looks exactly like the Death Star. You've got the logo of not the logo, I guess you would call it the crest of the House of Stark from Game of Thrones on the face of Mars, as well as the Star Trek emblem on Mars as well. But anyway, we're always finding these media tie-ins to the planets. It's fascinating. G33 says, who cares what shape they lie about everything? That's my point here, is that flat or round doesn't matter, because you will never perceive it as a ball, unless you think that looking at a screen is the same thing as perceiving, which it's not. But you will only experience it, being what you are, a human being, as a flat, seemingly infinite plane, with some indications of a curve if you think that boats are going over the hump, which is actually your eyes lying to you. You don't see that with your eyes. But my point of it is, you will never experience the shape itself as shape. However, you will experience your worldview as a filter. And if your filter includes a bunch of lies, like for example, superstitions, it just changes your perspective on things, or prejudices, stereotypes, logical fallacies. There's all sorts of things that I would consider to be malware that your mind can pick up. And I think the screen itself constitutes something of a filter on perceptions, and it gives people a false sense of security, a false sense of knowing. And all I'm saying is that the worldview that we all collectively share, the consensus worldview, the one that's mainstream, is comprised of many lies that are just a matter of going with the flow and believing what you're told. But do you have any first-hand information? Have you seen the Earth from space? No, you have not. I mean, at a very minimum, you should admit that you've taken a leap of faith, but that you feel that your faith in media is well-founded. But it's faith nonetheless, and you just can't conflate that with knowledge. For all you know, it's flat. But again, the more important thing is worldview. For example, we share a worldview where the most powerful people in the world could wake up on the wrong side of the bed, push a button, and blow everything up. That we could face, quote, global annihilation at any moment. That we are in a collective hostage situation. That's the state they have us in right now. And that state, I believe, is largely fraudulent. And I don't think it's any different than a fundamentalist religious cult where you believe that God's going to strike you dead if you think the wrong thought. It's basically paranoid. You could argue it's schizophrenic, but since the entire world has it, What does it even mean that everyone has been divorced from reality in some kind of, you could call it a simulation, but that kind of takes away from the reality of it. I would just say it's a lie augmented world, very much a doomsday cult. And we have been born into a doomsday cult. I'm not in one because I don't believe the sky is falling. Angle of Elevation says Trump's mugshot didn't have the height markers behind him, makes it look fake. Yeah, 6'3", 215 pounds, not sure if I believe it. Not Shocked says, did India really fake a moon landing with that Atari imagery? Yep, space is made in a Bollywood basement. I saw that. No, that's a common misconception. And I think it's funny, and I let it go. And people retweet the heck out of it, and people are laughing and just saying that's got to be fake. And I'm glad for that. But that's calling it fake for the wrong reason. Because you don't have a camera on the moon to record the landing, they give you a simulation in the form of an animation. So you can kind of know where it is. So they're cheering real time at an animation that supposedly corresponds with what is actually going on the moon. Although I doubt that most of the people who are cheering about this even look it up. I don't think they even care. Kamala says flat Earth is an archaic model before the 15th century. Now, was flat Earth ever a model? I don't think it was. And I don't think it is now. You see, this is a misconception. The misconception is that there are people who think that the Earth is like a pancake with a bowl over it and it's floating in space. No, this is the problem, I think. The problem is that you think that they've gone from one to the other. And many have, but it's not defensible. And I've always been a critic of that kind of approach. I'm saying, hey, you're putting the cart before the horse. If you assume you know the model, you're going to find facts that support that model. That's just how the mind operates. I would go with, let's just not assume that the model they've given us is true and then proceed based on the facts. And sometimes you end up with less stuff you can rely on, less knowledge, and a lot of uncertainty and a lot of question marks. And that's where I've been. A lot of people are so certain there's a dome, they're so certain they know the entire model that they no longer feel any need to do any more research. And that's why the whole flat earth thing kind of disappeared into conferences and religious cultism. I don't know if you know, but the last major conference they had, or the second to the last one, it had this like religious cult within it. We called them the Domers, but they called themselves Skyfall, and this was a teaching. They actually had a piece of glass they claimed came from the dome, and they had told all the people in this group, and you had to pay a lot to get in it. Like they really made sure you were a true believer, that the dome in the sky was going to crack and the glass was going to fall and crush the non-believers, and the face of the Lord would be staring down at everyone. Except the flat earthers would be, of course, saved. And I remember thinking that's got to just be another doomsday cult like any sort of mainstream one. Space junk, Armageddon, space wars, climate change. And I immediately realized this has got to be some kind of a government operation to mislead a lot of people who may have come across some valuable leads, like actual indicators of hoaxery. For example, you may believe you're on a ball, that's fine, you don't know it. We all know you don't know it, that's fine. A lot of people believe in unicorns, it doesn't matter. My point being, we know for a fact that the so-called ISS as presented on the live streams is clearly a studio, it's a movie studio, among other things. So you can conjecture about your ball all you want, but you cannot prove that the ISS is real. And that's a problem. And what I also noticed when we started talking about this on these live streams and opening phones, a lot of people reflexively lie to defend the worldview they were conditioned to believe. People would say, oh, I see satellites at night all the time. I'm like, oh, really? And some of them will even say, I see the ISS every 90 minutes. I'm like, really? Okay, what time did you see it? And I try to get into specifics, what time, what day, and it gets very blurry. But then when I bring up, did you know that you can only see low Earth orbit satellites when they're reflecting the sun, which means you can't see them once they've crossed the terminator. And that means that most of the so-called satellite sightings that people refer to could not possibly be satellites. It's just not possible. They don't have lights on them. So what are they? Well, planes. And it's entirely possible that you could mistake a plane for something in low Earth orbit if it's somewhat ambiguous to a point, except for, again, the fact that satellites would have to have the sun as a light source. And remember, if you believe you're on a ball and you look at it from space, half of it is dark, half of it is lit. The dark half is in a shadow, and the shadow of that hypothetical ball extends into space 875 million miles, which means you couldn't possibly see anything that's in the umbra of the Earth's shadow. It just wouldn't be possible. And if it's further out, it's not going to be moving fast enough that you would actually detect it as a moving light. It would be geostationary. Going through some comments here. Rocco Calzone says, I've been to D.C. I took the Amtrak and I saw the White House Lincoln Memorial. D.C. is real. Real what? I know it's real, but real what? Now, I would say that it's definitely replete with occult and Masonic architecture and symbolism. Like, people may not realize that, and it became very clear on the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11, that Washington Monument is quite literally the phallus of Osiris. It's basically it's an ancient symbol. It's an obelisk. It's the symbol of the god of resurrection. And when they projected Saturn V, and this was on the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11, they projected the Saturn V rocket onto the Washington Monument. They reenacted Apollo 11. And my point being that the Saturn V is the same symbol, it's an obelisk, as the Washington Monument. And these both refer to the real meaning behind the space program, which of course isn't about space. Space is a hoax. The entire space program is just a replacement theology. It's sort of like the new religion that unifies all mankind, but space is the replacement heaven. And I'm sorry if you fell for it, but it's a false paradise and you will never achieve it. In fact, the only purpose to showing you the Mars program and these utopian schemes in space is to convince you that that's the future that we should all desire, so they can make that happen here on Earth. You will have Mars on Earth before you get to Mars. And by Mars, I mean the sustainable, green, domed, you could call it feudalistic lifestyle. Not Shock says, I did see the ISS supposedly a couple years ago. All I saw was a light move rapidly across the sky near sunset. Well, that's still hearsay. And here's one other argument I would make against that. When we talk about something that you don't have any tangible evidence for but hearsay, or you're told it's there, they give you some bit of suggestion that you look here, you might see it. That doesn't mean it's in the realm of possibility. For example, there are places you can go where they say, oh, in these woods, Bigfoot, Sasquatch is known to be kind of noisy around Bigfoot mating season. So you go camping and you hear some noises, and it's probably an elk. But if you really believe in Bigfoot, and now it's in your realm of possibility because you already, quote, believe it, now when you hear the elk, you're going to think you're hearing Bigfoots. And that kind of like, well, you're more or less going to say, well, it might have been a Bigfoot. You're going to lean to that. And it never actually entered into the realm of possibility. It was never meant to be. Like, it's not logical to even include it. And I'm saying that the moon landings are obviously fake. They've been debunked to death. The existence of the ISS has not only been not established, it's been contradicted so many ways. So this idea that the light in the sky has any correlation to the so-called ISS it's not even there. It's just a suggested, it's both suggestion and a sort of a cognitive bias they give you. But what you saw was an airplane. It's the best I can say. Unless you could tell us, unless you have, the only evidence I'll ever accept for the ISS is seeing the ISS in a video with the sky and the app that shows that it's scheduled to be there. No one has ever produced that. And this is an important point. Every single ISS transit you ever see is in front of the moon or in front of the sun. Why is that? Because both of these instances eliminate the eyewitness. You realize there's no eyewitness if you have to have a solar filter on it to see it during the day, which means that there's room for it to be faked. There's no eyewitness when you're doing a night shot of the ISS because, as I said earlier, there's no light on any of these low Earth orbit objects after sunset, so you can't even see it. You're trying to catch the silhouette in front of the moon. Now, that act of taking the eyewitness out, to me, means you're no longer an eyewitness. I don't have any examples of a true eyewitness to the ISS. But anyway, I cut down on the number of people making false claims. I certainly did that when I started pointing out that the Terminator matters. I looked it up. I'm like, yeah, the Terminator line would prevent most of these from even being possible. But you have to clear the space because people do engage in a bit of, I won't say self-deception, but it's sleight of mind, which is another word for self-deception. Kamala says, why would all the other planets be round in the solar system, but the Earth is somehow flat? Yeah, I'll take round Earth questions all night, and I'll answer that with a question. The Earth is an oblate spheroid. The Earth is not a round shape. It's not even a sphere. It's an oblate spheroid, like a pumpkin. It's fat in the middle. Why? Conservation of angular momentum, the same reason the solar system is flat, the same reason the galaxies are flat. In other words, if the Earth is an oblate spheroid, why are all the other planets round? They should all be oblate. You don't have an explanation for that. You cannot find a single planet, whether in our solar system or any exoplanet, that is anything but a perfect sphere. Yet the Earth is an oblate spheroid. So that whole argument that the other planets are round, therefore the Earth must be round, sorry, that argument fails. Nice try. But I'd be happy to see an oblate spheroid in the sky somewhere, if you can find one. You know what I think is really missing? I think we're missing space clouds, and that bothers me because it's dusty here, and I cannot see the horizon if it's a little windy. And I'm thinking, those stars are millions of miles away. There's cosmic dust by the ton falling on the Earth every day, and you're telling me there's not enough dust between my eyeballs and a planet a million miles away to at least block it with a little bit of cloud once in a while? Nope, never. Okay, continuing. Elephant Tusk says, is it possible the Earth is a hypercube? Yeah, it is. That's probably what it is. Like, see, the Earth may not even be a place. Like, I know this sounds, and I'm not a New Ager, but there are times where I question if the universe even exists until we perceive it. And that would explain almost everything that I've experienced in terms of meaningful synchronicities. Like, let's say the universe is just inherently and intrinsically meaningful and everything is connected, that it's a experience that's designed for us, that it's not just some kind of an accident, then it would make a lot more sense that what we're experiencing isn't a dead pile of matter floating in space and then we're on it for a temporary amount of time, but it outlasts us, but rather it is us. And if that's the case, then shape doesn't matter whatsoever. However, your perception of the shape would matter if it was intended to constrain your mind, your imagination to a worldview that actually makes you subservient for a two-tiered society where a small cabal could rule over you. I mean, that's what it looks like to me. The worldview is meant to serve the power elite. Like the worldview that includes nukes, possible alien invasions, climate change, pandemics. Like, to me, that's not a very productive way to look at things. It's a fear-based filter. It's why I'm not in a religious cult. Like, why aren't you in a doomsday cult? Why aren't you living in a bunker? Because you know it would suck. You know it has no relationship to the reality out there. But collectively, we have been coerced into something of a bunker mentality. At least the people who are heavily involved politically. But what I'm suggesting is, hypothetically, let's say it's not real until we experience it, then the shape wouldn't really matter in any regard. But worldview would be everything, and I think that's the case regardless. And the people who are stuck on the shape question are missing the bigger point here. Because let's say it's not the shape so much as they're faking space because they're hiding a continent, or they're faking space because Antarctica is not all ice and they're hiding some great land. Whatever it is, there's an incentive for them to fake it. And if they're faking it, then they're collaborating. And why is it that all these countries that are supposedly enemies behind the scenes are sharing the same special effects department? That tells you right now how everything is a charade. King of Flat Earth has joined us. Says, can you rephrase the question? G33 says, how can you judge the seasons in navigation by looking up? I'm not an anything earther. Well, everything from the system of symbols that they use, the elite, indicates that they quite literally base everything on this astrological template, which is all really intriguing. In fact, let's go ahead and get into the main topic. There's quite a lot of predictive programming and stuff around Trump, but I'm not going to dwell on that at this moment. It just seems to me that this is all just like the new form of swatting. Right wingers used to get attention by getting swatted. Now they get attention by getting their mugshots, and they're all enjoying it too much. I saw a pretty good one. It had like Trump's lawyers and Sidney Powell the Kraken, all of their mugshots boxed together like the Brady Bunch, and it called them the Shady Bunch. And they used to say the left couldn't meme, but sometime in the last few years, the left has actually kind of got a foothold on it. Angle of Elevation says, why wouldn't they lie? They hate you. Yeah, let's just take their logic, okay? Let's say the Earth is perfectly a ball as described. Let's just say maps are objective, okay? Let's pretend that's true, which is a stretch, by the way, because when you really get down to it, the Mercator map projection that most of us were raised on, the one that most of us see when we look at various representations of the Earth, it actually grossly exaggerates the size of the continents in the north hemisphere versus the ones in the south. So let's just say you actually believe you're on the map and they're not really fudging with it, which again I can prove to you right now they do. What makes this more trustworthy than the news? We know they lie in the news. We know for a fact they lie in history. That history is a set of lies agreed upon, as Napoleon said. Well, I'd say that the mass media today is a set of lies that are eventually agreed upon. I mean, they fight over it at the top. But you're like, no, they lie about the news. All the religions are based on lies. History's lies. But the maps we can trust. When the one thing they seem to care about more than anything is terrain, property, real estate, and that's the one place where they're honest, give me a break. The entire environmentalist movement is just a power grab, a land grab. It always has been. It was never about saving the planet. It was about stealing it. And they've been doing it ever since. They sold you on the premise. So the idea that somehow maps are sacrosanct and they're all going to be objective, that's laughable. Your lack of skepticism, for those who absolutely just believe what you're told about the ball Earth, is actually naive, shockingly naive, given how obviously distorted everything else about the world is. World Mercator projection with true country size added. This is from brilliantmaps.com. It's known the Mercator projection distorts the world, and this shows you how much. So if you're looking at the animation on the screen, you can see what I'm talking about here, where Africa is exaggeratedly small, and Greenland is grossly over-exaggerated to where it's as big as Africa, where everything, this is just something people take for granted. So seeing isn't believing. So what I wonder is, when you look at the globe that they show you from space, do you actually believe that, and why? Why is it more trustworthy when it comes from NASA than when it comes from whoever's dividing up the land? But the idea that these maps are somehow approximations of reality and you can trust them, maybe at a local level. But there are huge areas where it's just like, I don't know. You have a lot of faith in people who have a lot of incentive to lie to you. Okay, let's see here. Going to your comments. Lickety Split says Carthaginians used to Carthaginians told everyone it was flat to scare them from exploring and going to the edge. Yeah, I've come across a few accounts of that. Like, I don't know if it's true that Christopher Columbus was told he was going to fall off the edge, but it is true that the first Roman geographer had said that the equator would be so hot and unsurvivable beyond it that there's no point in going. So people used to believe there was a firewall. Okay, let's go to the review. Portal to Babylon. The occult subtext to Barbie. I watched Barbie, and the vomit emoji would be appropriate right here. Just all the pink. Like, it was an eyesore. It took a moment to adjust. But it wasn't as bad as Wes Anderson's movie in terms of it's just the overbearing visual nature of it. But once you get that it's a comedy and it's kind of funny, then it kind of doesn't matter. It's just like a long skit. It's not bad. I mean, actually, it kind of is in a lot of ways. But I'm not here to judge the movie as good or bad. I'm actually analyzing the predictive programming because I don't think there's any difference between mass media news and mass media entertainment. I know CNN is terrible. I know Fox is terrible, but I watch these to know what people are thinking. And there's no way I'm going to let this movie escape my scrutiny given how prevalent it has been, not just how it's being promoted and who it's being promoted to, but also how the right wing has rejected it and reacted against it. So I'm looking into it and I'm realizing that the main actress, Margot Robbie, was in Babylon, the movie Babylon. So I look into that movie, which was written by the satanic priest filmmaker. We talked about this the other day, how this individual who wrote the book Hollywood Babylon, the basis for Babylon, starring Margot Robbie, that he was a key figure in externalizing a lot of the teachings of Crowley and the sexual revolution, and all of it being communicated through film. In fact, you would consider Kenneth Anger possibly to be one of the progenitors of the music video, among other things. Hugely influential, but interesting character, how just connected he is to Satanism, Hollywood, Disney, sexual revolution, and the occult ritual called the Babylon working at the very genesis of the space age. So there's all this interesting correlations and connections in the underground Hollywood that does kind of show that there is something more to Hollywood than just entertainment. And yeah, it's propaganda, sure, but there's another element to it. And that's why I watched this movie. So the subtext is this. I attended the earliest showing, by the way, so there weren't that many people there. The ticket guy asked if I needed the manager, and if I did that, he would be available. They're always nice to me because I carry a clipboard and a notebook, and I'm always taking notes. So it's like they assume that I'm someone from some company, maybe I'm reviewing them. So they treat me nice. They don't give me free popcorn, but anyway, I sat in the back of the theater and I watched it because I was curious. There's so much faux outrage on the political right about feminism, and as I suspected, the feminism only scratches the surface. There's an esoteric layer. So a couple of things. We'll start with the names. Babylon, spelled with an A instead of a Y, is the specific spelling used by the OTO occultists to designate their priestess, who they consider to be a living portal, a gateway. Babylon means gates of the gods, and Robbie had previously starred in the 2022 Babylon. Barbie was named after the creator's daughter, Barbara, and Babs, short for Barbara. Anyway, there's a couple of things about the name I thought were worth noting, but mainly that what we're seeing here is a reference to the occult goddess. So the movie begins with History of the Dolls, and it's a nod to Space Odyssey, 2001 Space Odyssey, but instead of a monolith, it's a big Barbie doll. And the narrator is giving a history of dolls. And her tone is suggesting that motherhood is a prison sentence, and that playing with dolls is training for drudgery and boredom. Then Barbie shows up. She's like a tall monolith in a black and white bikini. And the little girls who were mothers in training start killing their baby dolls by dashing the heads on the rocks, choosing the Barbie-lon life. They sacrifice their babies for money, houses, cars, and a career to live in Barbie land. Barbie looks on at the infanticide, lowers her glasses with one hand and makes that 666 gesture and winks. Tour of Barbie land. When they go into Barbie land, there's a lone pregnant Barbie, and someone remarks how they had to discontinue that one because it would be too weird. Again, I'm just bringing this up because the initial point here was liberating women from the bonds of motherhood. And the attitude of the Barbie characters in Barbie Land, it's all just what you would call white feminism that it's been criticized for. But I'm saying it's really not the point. Ken is described as superfluous, as are men in general in Barbie Land. And men don't have any reproductive function in Barbie Land. And I question, will they in future America Babylon? Now, this anti-patriarchy stuff is just a cover for the deeper societal inversions. Now, there was one particular scene that stood out to me where Barbie is driving in a car and she screams, "Yay, space!" And you have these astronauts above in obviously fake space. It's so corny looking. And everybody in the audience is laughing at these astronauts waving down from space. And I just thought it was ironic because it's no faker than a lot of the stuff that, like we just saw with the India moon landing. Like when I see people laughing, it's like, you guys realize and especially in these movie theaters, you're laughing at yourselves. Continuing, Babylon Gate, the portal to the real world, opened when Barbie started having thoughts of mortality and death. As a doll, these things should not concern her. She's offered a Matrix like choice to stay in Barbie Land or enter the real world. The deal was offered as, I mean, the movie was kind of comical, but this is a Matrix reference. Not blue pill, red pill, but it was Birkenstock or high heel. So she goes into the real world, and there's this Bon Voyage sign that says, "Good luck restoring the membrane that separates Barbie Land from the real world." So the word membrane is very relevant here. We'll get to that in a second. Now, if you look at the screen, she's exiting, and there's an archway. It's a colorful archway that separates the two worlds. And I'm saying that the Barbie Land archway is analogous to the Ishtar Gate, the gate to the inner city of Babylon. And she arrives in California, which is relevant because it is the site of the Babylon working, where they were summoning this goddess and its energies into the New Age via the portal Marjorie Cameron. The New Age goddess, the Babylon, is a living idol and a gateway to trans-dimensional energies, specifically via sex magic, in which the goddess is symbolized by a chalice, the Holy Grail, or a heart. These all symbolize, of course, the womb. And Barbie does not have reproductive parts at first. So just to get the symbolism here, in the previous aeon, their goddess Isis was veiled. In the New Age, she is unveiled. This represents Barbie's transformation. This is what she's actually going through as she goes from doll to real woman. We witness the transition from virgin to whore, from boxed to liberated, from confined in Barbie Land to loosed in the real world. She achieves self-consciousness, kind of like Truman Burbank in The Truman Show. She wants to become a true woman, which means she chooses to leave this Barbie Land and she confronts her maker. Now she breaks out of her box, and this disrupts the world. And there are elements of Pandora's box in the movie. Pandora is the world's first woman. She was commissioned. Zeus didn't make her, but he commissioned her construction. And she releases chaos into the world with her box. Now the trope of Pandora's box was already associated with the female body going back 300 years to like Jonathan Swift. My point being, every reference here, as you'll see, ties into the same thing. My previous post on the topic, the pink mass, Barbie as the whore of Babylon, mainstreaming Satanism, idol worship, and sexual revolution, it's about Margot Robbie embodying the Babylon archetype. And in the movie, this movie, it's all about the color pink, and I explain what the pink means. But specifically, the symbol of Barbie coming out of the box is about releasing the energies of the new goddess into the world, changing women and challenging patriarchy. So she goes through the portal. She goes into the real world to go meet the Wizards of Mattel, the CEO. They go in the building, and the button they push says all the way up. Now, when she goes into the office, and the CEO is played by Will Ferrell, he describes the building as phallic. He uses that word, and it's very significant, as you'll see here. In the office space, they're around a big table with a reflection, and behind them, the windows have X's on them, which looks like the Masonic symbol, or it creates triangles, with the reflection being very obvious here. And if you look at the image of Will Ferrell with his reflection in the table and he's in the triangle, it looks like the image from various alchemical illustrations that represents the macrocosm being reflected in the microcosm. Now what this means is it's about influence in the world. The very theory of magic is the altar is a miniature of the world, and what you do there affects what's out there. That's just the theory of Hermetic magic. As above, so below. And what they're establishing here is that Barbie Land is some kind of you could say, um, some kind of altar. That this Barbie land has some kind of relationship with the real world in that sense. So I'm calling them the Wizards of Mattel. So again, all the way up, top of the tower, Mattel is influencing the real world using Barbie land as the microcosm. Throughout the movie, the relationship between Barbie land and the real world is established, and that when she crosses the portal, she disrupts this balance. So, in other words, Barbie Land is a spell cast over the world by male wizards in a phallic tower to convince women in the real world that they're not secretly enslaved by the patriarchy. So, you can look at it as these are wizards, and these dolls are actually idols, not just dolls, but they're technically idols. And that's the underlying significance that he reveals here, is that there's some kind of relationship here. And I'm suggesting what they're revealing with the symbolism is that this, since he's all the way up, and Aleister Crowley describes that the hexagram represents the heavenly macrocosmic, which means all the way up, and the microcosmic is all the way down. It's as above, so below. So here they are at the top of their tower, and they're somehow influencing the world into the spell that she's breaking when she's released. And I'm suggesting this is the exact same concept of this new goddess being released into the world, and the monolith like appearance was the birth of feminism. And it's notable too, I think, that 1946 is the year of the Babylon working. 1946, you had nuke testing at Bikini Island. We already talked about the significance of Bikini Island, the nuke tests, and that's where the term bombshell was invented, referring to the bikini and women, and it was the term that you really couldn't separate it from the nukes, the nuclear detonations. But continuing, someone in the movie asks, is Barbie Land in the imagination, or is it a parallel universe? And the Wizards of Mattel answer, yes. They answer yes, meaning both. Kind of ambiguous, but interesting. Now, he attempts to coerce her back into the box because the chaos has been loosed in the world starting in California. Again, this is very consistent with the very idea of what the Babylon working was about. And like Zeus's commissioned creation Pandora, the first woman who released chaos into the world, Barbie looses this Barbie land, which is, again, I'm saying Barbie land is Babylon, into the real world. Now, in summary, the movie is about the portal, the gate, the membrane, the veil between worlds. The heart, the portal, the gate, the membrane all represent the barrier as she goes into the physical world. And these are all euphemisms. It's a very euphemistic. And it has to do with patriarchy ending feminine energies and attitudes that reshape the world. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, she begins as a plastic doll. And she's embodying this transformation of the goddess from veiled to unveiled. Well, it turns out the very last line of the movie, she goes up to, well, she's talking to the screen, but she goes up to her doctor's office and she asks for a gynecologist. Like, that's the last line in the movie. That's the last word, gynecologist. So it is specifically about that, the portal, the every other euphemistic way they use to refer to this Babylon goddess and the chalice, Holy Grail, etc. In other words, it's all part of this occult role that she's playing. This affirms it, that she's communicating the new aeon energies and transforming society through this redefinition of femininity, etc. And so therefore each Barbie is packaged in a Pandora's box, and there aren't enough Ben Shapiros in the world to burn them all. Now, if you haven't read the Pink Mass Barbie as Whore of Babylon, I go into the explanation for ascribing to Margot Robbie this role of being an avatar, and you'll see it's consistent, and it's absolutely the case. It's undeniable, irrefutable, and the fact that the Barbie movie ended with a reference to that particular body part 100% confirms that yes, we are looking at a scripted world stage character, and it has me wondering if her role as Sharon Tate, getting stabbed in the stomach 16 times, may also tie into this goddess concept, because it's ultimately about that, the womb, the heart, the chalice. But anyway, overlapping symbolism. But as you can see, the masses have been given idol worship, and it starts. They really do target the young with the mind warping propaganda, and it's funny, I guess, because it's a comedy. But again, at the beginning of the movie, you see a bunch of children dashing babies' heads on rocks, and somehow it's made into a laughing point. But I don't know if it's actually all that funny. Okay, I'm going through your comments. Salty says Margie Margot reference. Margot Robbie also played in a movie called Bombshell in 2019, a Lionsgate film. Okay, Bombshell. Interesting. Well, now we got this correlation between Bombshell, Bikini Island, the nukes, the Babylon working, the advent of the nuke, and the introduction of this supposed the introduction of these energies. But it was that year that she saw the UFO. And all of this does tie into the movie Asteroid City about a movie star who sees a UFO, whose real name happens to be Scarlet, because we're talking about the Scarlet Woman when we're referring to this archetype or this goddess Babylon, who uses the biblical imagery of the whore of Babylon, and that's why the scarlet's so prevalent. But ultimately, it's the red scarlet that ties into Mars, because the New Age is about the worship of Mars, who they represent as an androgynous deity, taking equal parts from. So what we're looking at here isn't just patriarchy being taken down. It's actually, yeah, of course, masculinity is toxic, and the man of the future is like Ken, who has no reproductive role, sure. But they're not like elevating the woman. They're actually bringing the woman and the man down equally, and they're replacing it with this new fusion. I mean, the idea of the crown conquering child that Crowley spoke about, to me, it's kind of absurd that you would want to put a childlike mentality. But what they mean by this is completely divorced from tradition or the past. And you look at, brats like Greta Thunberg, where her whole premise is, how dare you ruin my life with your polluting and your guns. And they want to empower that. Not Shock says, my two daughters saw Barbie, and they didn't think it was very good. They were expecting it to be funny, not sad. Yeah, unfortunately, what could have been funny was overshadowed by grievance politics, blaming men, and even kind of racist. Like Barbie was actually dressed down for her white feminism. Like it was sort of, if you ask me, it was just too awash with leftist politics, and I can see why it triggered the right. But again, that's just a cover. It really is just a cover for what's really going on, and we're looking at a global transformation of and a redefinition of humanity, and we're all seeing it right now, obviously. Transhumanism, which is the dominant world faith. It's like everything else can exist underneath that. That's why space is so important as a construct. You can have your different concepts of religion, you can have your gods, but as long as we believe in space, we're on the same sheet. Okay, is anybody still talking about the missing Do children? That was all the rage for the last few days, but now nobody's talking about it. Now it's all about Trump again. The missing Do children. 1,000 children were supposedly vaporized, and nobody's talking about them, even though everybody's talking about them. Kind of like after the derailment in Palestine, Ohio, nobody was talking about the toxic airborne event, but everybody was talking about it. You know what's a current thing when everybody's talking about how nobody's talking about it, so they can sound like they're the first one to bring it up. That's when I know, oh, it's just another mind virus. Let it pass. I'm not going to catch this one. I've been inoculated, actually. Apparently nobody cares anymore. I was like, where's Tim Ballard? He's always about saving the children, the tunnel children, but he's not out there in Maui looking for the missing Do children. By Do, I mean direct energy weapons vaporized by Chinese space lasers. But it's being covered up by the Democrats. Now, this is what Infinite Muse said in our Gilded server. Just a thought, but if there really were children, and if they are missing or disappeared, it could theoretically be trafficking, restocking supply. Not Do tunnel kids, but regular trafficking, sex or otherwise. But if nobody's actually missing children, then it's definitely psyop fear porn. I don't have any evidence children are dead or missing, and I don't know anyone out there, or I would investigate further. Okay, my answer is I find it hard to believe that anyone really wants to deal with babysitting on that scale. Like, if you think about it, some of the numbers, like, oh, 70,000 children are in the tunnels beneath Los Angeles. Do you realize what kind of infrastructure you would need to manage that? Subterranean NWO satanic daycare centers? Who would run it? They all have needs. And again, by now, they've all grown up and they're ready to vote. Nobody ever saved the children in 2015 when they first started this movement. But I noticed too, and I call them out on this, the same people who say, what about Madhu children? I'm like, well, what about the AR-15 victims? Because they still believe that children are being killed by AR-15s. They just think it's caused by antidepressants. But they still believe it's happening. See, I don't know what's happening. They don't either. They just believe it. So in other words, they take the bait and they're willingly ignoring certain deaths. Oh, I don't care about the ones that were gunned down because that's not politically expedient for my side. I care about the ones that were killed by the Chinese space lasers that I can't prove. So you have these hypothetical kids that you're crying for on Twitter, Mike Cernovich, Jack Posavec, that you're raging over, virtue raging. That's what the right does. They get in their car and they virtue rage. The left virtue signals, the right virtue rages. So they're raging about these kids, but they don't care about the other ones. And I'm just saying it's hypocritical. Although the left loves nothing more than a fresh pile of dead kids to grandstand on top of in order to score political points against the Second Amendment. So both sides are equally bad. Continuing here, we says, what does Rocco say? Look, nobody, yeah, Rocco's called in as well, and nobody has any evidence of anything other than there being an effort by the authorities there to prevent people from going in and checking for themselves. And then you couple this with the fact that the chief of police in Maui is not only the coroner, but he also presided over the fake event in Vegas, the Harvest Festival. I just find it hard to believe that anybody that children are this much of a commodity. I think it's overhyped. I really think so. I think most kidnappings are, people in the family. The trafficking thing, yeah, I'm sure it happens, but if you really care about the stuff, go shut down the whole institution of child brides wherever it's occurring in the world. That's trafficking. I mean, you could shut down a lot of things, I think, right now. There's slavery, sure, there are open slave trade markets, but they only do it if the cameras are watching and it ties into something locally and it's politically advantageous to go there. For example, the entire thing with Tim Ballard was not only to bolster Q, but to hype up Trump's wall. Oh, we have to build the wall because they're sending their children through the wall, to the borders. So we close the borders, we can stop trafficking. So it was never about saving the children, it was about political points. But no, we haven't heard anything from anybody's kids anywhere. And the missing kids, some, yeah, have suspected that maybe they got taken into the tunnels and they're being harvested for their adrenochrome. There were a lot of crisis actors driving around crying, saying something about how children were sent home. But they do these things because it's sort of like the babies in incubators. This is atrocity propaganda. If it's really happening, then why do they have to have these really terrible actors telling us about it second or third hand? But this is what we do here. No, I do believe there is child trafficking, but I don't think it's in the numbers they say. I don't think it comports with the Q numbers, and I don't believe in the adrenochrome BS. And I don't think that anybody on the political right, MAGA or otherwise, have lifted a finger to save a single child. So to say that there is child trafficking, prove it, point to it, show me. Like, I know there is, obviously, but I'm saying, where is it organized or centralized on the level that they say, where it's like a Democrat thing? And like, there's just a point here where focus on the facts. If we're talking about real crimes, it's a serious matter, especially when you're talking about children. Adoption services says lickety split. See, there you go. That's where you start. If you want to find real instances of human trafficking and organized abuse, look at the adoption services. It's frightening. Or the Boy Scouts, or the religious organizations, or the public schools. I mean, there's all kinds of places to go, but it's not just at the border where Tim Ballard's there to intercept just at the nick of time. Jay Digg says Rocco says he thinks people died in houses burned but doesn't know anyone, and there aren't thousands of parents and grandparents. Yeah, it's tricky. It really is tricky. Ready or Not says, you don't believe that, Tim? Look into the black market human meat ring in Missouri. I heard about one in Kenosha. I heard that Gage Grosskreutz sold his arm into the black market human meat ring there in Kenosha. And I think Alex Jones was trying to buy it along with Khloe Kardashian's vestigial tail, which she also sold. Wait, no, that was an episode of South Pole. I'm sorry, that was a cartoon. We actually had that in an episode of South Pole. Gage Grosskreuz's arm and Chloe's vestigial tail. I'm sorry, it's a cartoon. Mr. Mitsu, that was the one. You know, we ought to get back into animation. If they do lockdowns again, I'm not going to be out there protesting lockdowns because it's all going to be controlled opposition at this point. Carrie Lake is going to be leading it. You're going to be mixed in with all the MAGAs and the Q shamans and all that. I'm like, I'm going to stay home and just do cartooning. Okay, let's see here. I guess the reason why I'm kind of dismissive of the right wing Save the Children is that it's just as fake as the left. The left wants to save children from AR-15s, right? The right wants to save children from trafficking, right? So they both want to save children. Well, first of all, no children are being killed by AR-15s. That's all fake. So why should I think that the psyops are, as they always are, aren't just bifurcated in this case as well? That every one of these stories about a school shooting is fake. Every one of these stories about children being rescued, I don't know. Some of it's questionable. I think Tim Ballard's a fraud. I think Jim Caviezel is a grifting fraud and probably a psychopath, possibly even a megalomaniac, because he told Mel Gibson that he was meant to play Jesus because he was 33. Like, he probably thinks he is Jesus. And then he said that I'm still Jesus because Trump was getting all kinds of accolades for being Christ and the whole Holy Week thing. But he said you can wear the mantle of Moses. So Jesus McKeezel or Quavizel gave Trump the Moses status. Pippi says, I'm going to wear a mask just to confuse. Yeah, I figured I'm going to comply. No, I'm going to not comply with the non-compliance, which will look like compliance. So you might say, oh, this guy is a shill. He's wearing a mask. Well, no, actually, I'm not complying, but I'm not complying with your non-compliance because I think your non-compliance is fake grassroots. It's astroturfed. There's no options, right? There's no third option. You either comply or you don't comply. Jay Digg says, people weren't even talking about adrenochrome anymore, but no one told Jim Caviezel. Yeah, the adrenochrome story died away, and you think they stopped doing it? Why did it just stop? The people who believed it with their whole hearts and preached it no longer talk about it. Why is that? Did they solve it? It's like they all kind of went quiet. I think if you have a conspiracy theory that at the very top of it charges your political enemies with being vampires, and you put all your effort into proving this and then it's wrong, I think you need to step down and say, okay, we just got to start from ground zero. But no, they just kind of gloss over it. And the idea of the adrenochrome is some kind of life extension or it makes you look young. He says it with a straight face. And I'm like, well, who do you accuse of being an adrenochrome junkie? Let me see these people who are just conspicuously not aging. So I look at Hillary Clinton, I look at George Soros, and I'm like, okay, I don't think these people are on the adrenochrome. Okay, let's move on. Those are just bad rumors. Do you remember Mousegate, which is real? Mousegate is real. CRS 19, December 6th, 2019. Elon Musk sends a rocket to the space station full of mice that are genetically modified to be resistant to muscular atrophy, to see how long they can last in space versus regular mice in the Mighty Mouse test they were doing. Well, Mighty Mouse is a cartoon mouse who can fly in space. On this mission to send mice to space, a mouse was spotted on the outside of the space station. And we talked about it. In fact, we covered it and it kind of went viral. And Starlink's head of security actually started stalking me on Twitter after that. Anyway, it really happened. There was a mouse on the outside of the rocket. Or somebody had created a CGI mouse and put it on the rocket. But that's what it was. It was a CGI mouse on the outside of a fake rocket. The people who believe it's real can't figure this out. Like, wait, I think the rocket's real, but the mouse is obviously CGI. So they're just confused. They're scratching their heads, their minds are blown, they can't figure it out, and they're stuck with video compression artifact space ice. Then I have to prod them, and I say, okay, fine. Then why is that video compression artifact space ice at Mach 8 perfectly shaped like a moving mouse, moving like a mouse, even with the tail? And they say, it's just space ice. So I ask them, do you not find it at least interesting that at Mach 8, random ice in space can form into the shape of a mouse and move around like a mouse on a mission where they're sending mice to space? Like, do you not see a coincidence there? And they're just blank faced, like, duh, no. It's just mind-blowing how blown their minds are by this whole space thing, where they can't even think objectively and recognize when they're being messed with. That's how powerful the cognitive dissonance is. I think it broke their minds. Because again, this is everything of it that you would expect from an inside joke from someone like someone like Musk. Hey, we're sending Mighty Mouse to space. Let's put a CGI mouse on the outside as like a little Easter egg as a joke. So what happened? It's real. It's evidence at a minimum that on a so-called live launch, they can insert artifacts. Or it's proof that the live launch wasn't live. But then how do you make that work? Because you can see the rocket launch, but then when they cut to the space footage, it's pre-produced. So you see, it's a big deal. It's a big problem. It should not be, but it is. My point is, even though we already demonstrated the existence of the Mouse Gate scandal and how it totally discredits SpaceX and NASA and how they're totally fake and obviously it's fake and you can no longer go back, even though we've already proven this to be true, there are people trying to cloud this. There are people trying to cover it up. There's a channel on Twitter, on X, called The Flat Earther, spelled with two R's. Now, The Flat Earther posts a lot of what I think truther bait. In this case, he says, remember when a mouse made its way into the fake X live feed during a SpaceX launch? So he posts a video of it, and it gets fact-checked. This video was digitally altered. So it looks like MouseGate is fake because it's been fact-checked. Now this guy has a huge channel, 1 million followers, 1 million retweets, and I'm wondering, why would he do this? Why would he take a fake MouseGate where he took the real footage and he inserted an actual mouse into it? So they took the actual MouseGate footage that was damning and then put something that was obviously fake and then shared it on big channels to where it can be publicly discredited. And I think it's intentional. I actually think these channels do this by design, that these are damage control agents put out there to discredit people who are coming up with legitimate criticisms. And because of this, I started something called the IPS Truther Wall of Shame. And what I'm doing here is I'm taking note of channels that are very big, that are conspicuously posting bad information in order to make us look crazy. So if you go to the Infinite Plane Society website, Truther Wall of Shame, you can see Maverick X. Maverick X is a bad one, and he blocked me. All these individuals block me. So he's a transvestigator, which means he believes that all dogs are cats and vice versa. All men are women, all cheerleaders are men, all football players are women. I mean, it goes down the line. Okay, so Maverick X is a transvestigator, and he shared this image of Lady Gaga, and you can see her unblocked. And I'm blocked because I said, I know she was wearing a disgusting human meat suit, but that doesn't mean you have to put a fake dong in there to prove that she's a man. And his idiot followers just lap it up. They all shared it, they all retweet it. They're like, yep, she's a man. I always knew it. So I do a right click search and I find out that the image that he was sharing, oh, see, look, you see I'm blocked, was doctored. So he put a fake one on Lady Gaga and shared it as, quote, truth. Here's another one. The flat earther gaslighting shill, again, spelled two R's. He shared this one. He said, more spraying, however, the sheeple will say it's contrails because of air temperature. So he's calling me a sheep because I don't believe that this is chemtrails. Now I'm using the soy jacks with red pills, and it's the fake red pill alert because you're looking at a plane, a Boeing 747 super tanker. It's a super tanker water bomber aerial drop from a high altitude. Like if they were really dumping chemicals, do you think they just have these photos floating around? But again, large channel, and he's sharing this bad evidence that this super tanker is somehow dumping chemicals on us. So I'm assuming that this guy's, well, obviously he's a liar and a deceiver because people believe him. Is he a Fed? Maybe, or maybe he's just a good grifter. But the point of it is, he's spreading bad information. And the reason for the truth or wall of shame is quality control. Because shortly after I did this, he deleted the tweet. And I've been challenging these types on their bad information for a long time, and they tend to ignore me or block me. But now that I'm putting them on this wall of shame, they're actually deleting their tweets. Lots of them are doing this. Anyway, shamelessly promoting obviously unfounded or ignorance-based claims is not how you lead people to truth. Doing so is very similar to what the MSM does anyway. It's unconscionable. I assume they're doing it for money, but regardless, it needs to be pointed out as just another facet of the mind war. This is what I refer to when I say it's the deluge. It's the data dump that typifies the age of Aquarius, where facts are losing their relevance in a sea of misinformation. Tominoid said Margot was in a movie called Bombshell. Someone had mentioned that. The director was in White Noise. Interesting. White Noise, again, was the movie that predicted the Ohio train derailment in Palestine. Not only did it predict it, but it contained actors, actual extras in the movie that were later evacuated from the actual train wreck. It was just like psyops imitate life more than life imitates psyops. I mean, there's some kind of relationship there. It became very obvious. Now, I haven't looked into this, but there's this theory that Garth Brooks is a serial killer and people go missing at all of his concerts. Have you heard this one? Is Garth Brooks a serial killer? Missing persons conspiracy theory. Recently, his online nemesis revealed that the singers blocked him on Instagram after he initiated these claims. Yeah, they claim it goes back to his alter ego Chris Gaines more than 20 years after releasing an album in the name. But apparently there's this rumor that he's been going around killing people. So Garth Brooks serial killer joke explained. Okay, apparently it's all a joke. I did kind of look into it. I thought it was intriguing that he had this alter ego, but no, apparently it's not true. Lean Dion says Mind AIDS is viral on X. Oh yes, you know this disease X that you've heard about? The disease X is X. Think about it. The whole purpose to the pandemic was not to poke half the population. It's not depopulation. It's not to save anybody. The whole purpose was mind war, the schism. And I would say, moreover, the whole purpose was censorship because it's a mind war. By mind war, it's about worldview warfare, controlling what you think by excluding certain thoughts. They can't tell you what to think because you have free will, but they can provide a very limited menu of ideas. That's what they're doing. And what I'm suggesting here is that the whole purpose of the pandemic was censorship. And if that's the case, then what do you think the purpose of X is for? Censorship. Get the most people in, put constraints on rate limit, prevent it from scraping, create a closed system, take the infinite plane of tweets, put a dome over it, and gradually shrink the universe of ideas until everybody's on the same monolithic sheet. Because that's what it is, this one worldview. To me, it's the new Bible, it's the new monotheism. But they have to centralize everything. So X, of course, came from Musk's previous business ventures. It's not even new. SpaceX ties into it. I've already connected him with the character of Constantine and the neo-feudalism represented by the Mars program. But Constantine had a vision of a glowing cross, and he said, "Under this sign I shall conquer." Musk put his glowing cross on Twitter. And I'm looking at the symbols, and you really can't separate the dove from the cross or the blue bird from the glowing X. Like what we're seeing here is the same old religion doing the same old thing it's always done in a modern context. So, in that sense, I think that disease X is X, and its whole purpose is censorship. That's why Musk is trying to get rid of the block feature. I think this is problem reaction solution. They want to make people demand censorship, demand internet quarantine, demand some kind of controls. I think it's the same reason why Musk and Bezos are being presented as space cowboys, space capitalists, because Musk is the leading purveyor of both space junk and mind junk. And one more point, the space program has never been about traveling to distant planets. It's always been about worldview warfare. That's why they showed you the world. It's about your inner space, your concept of the world. Mind control. Well, mind control and social media today are pretty much the same thing. They're trying to control your menu of thoughts through distracting you from stuff they don't want you to think about, providing you with what they want you to think about, and breaking up networks of people who are totally out of bounds, like us. I mean, it's really quite a feat if you think about it, that the Infinite Plane Society has been an ongoing, non-stop think tank on all of these topics, and our level of media criticism is really unmatched by any other active think tank that's been going on this long. 2016, 2017, and we've improved over time. But the fact is, they have not broken up this network. And if we had played by their rules, they would have. If we had played by their rules, we would have been shut down years ago. And a lot of people, a lot of voices probably had been shut down. A lot of channels that could have been great probably were shut down because they didn't have the tank. And that's really what it took. Because if you remember, when we started, we had a rule where every person who joined the think tank had to carry a wrench. We had to have nothing but mods so that we could reflexively ban anybody who hadn't been vetted. And that whole point of it was to have a coherent think tank with no trolls and no agenda driven evangels for this or that ideology. And so that model has pretty much sustained itself. And I think that had we not done that, we would have been drowned out by a lot of bad actors and more or less trolls, government trolls. Okay, I'm going through your comments. Wonka World says, love your synopsis of the Barbie movie. Thanks, and I know I misspelled Barbie Land a couple of times. My spell checker just missed that one. I have to do a couple corrections, but I would recommend read the part about the pink mass, because I don't talk about the pink very much in this latest review, because I'm mostly focusing on how the movie is ultimately about Barbie transforming from a doll to a living person and how that represents ISIS unveiled and the transformation of society as the definition of everything is changing. And there's another area we should probably look at for the symbolism, and this is why I need to see Oppenheimer. I think there's something about the destruction of the nuclear family and the splitting of the atom that are somehow connected. The nuclear age, because again, 1946 is the Babylon working. And I think there's some correlation between that and the 1946 Trinity explosion. Because we're not talking about a real nuclear bomb. We're talking about mind control. We're talking about a reboot on our schema, on our worldview, on a global level. I mean, really, it's like a global hostage situation followed by Stockholm syndrome is what happened. Collective Stockholm syndrome, where we've been placed into this dream world. But the timing of these things are obviously not coincidental. That's why Barbieheimer was so prevalent when it first came out. And then we've already figured the correlation between the bikini and bombshell and the bomb, how these things are actually connected. And then, moreover, we're talking about how this is something that's being put into the hands of children and how that is quite relevant if you think about the uh, power of propaganda itself. And I want to compare it to this. In 2020, Chadwick Boseman died, and children around the world were encouraged to do cemetery or little graveyard ceremonies for their dead doll, representing Chadwick Boseman, a man who died in real life. And they're crossing their arms over their chest, which is a sign of Osiris risen. My contention is that the Black Panther, the king of Wakanda, that he represents Osiris, this dead king. And here he is on the right. You look at the child, he's crying. Again, the arms crossed. Now, Rip King was trending in 2020 when Mr. 42 died. He played Mr. 42, Jackie Robinson. During that week, NBA had number 42 on all of their jerseys in honor of Kobe Bryant's 42nd posthumous birthday now, but he had died at 41. So the NBA was celebrating Mamba Week. They all had 42s, which is a symbol of Saturn. The MLB, Major League Baseball, were celebrating Jackie Robinson Week, and they all also wore 42s. So you have all kinds of 42s. Then you had BLM, which is the new version of what? Black Panthers. This is Black Panther, the movie The Black Panther. So there's a correlation between the toy Black Panther and the real world Black Panthers mourning the Black King, MLK, at the Washington Mall. So MLK is being mourned and celebrated, and it's Rip King. At the same time, Rip King is trending for the dead Black Panther. Overlapping ceremonies, the obelisk symbol at the Washington Monument, the symbol of Osiris I talked about earlier, is the symbol of the god who's in the grave. And that this is a worship of gods through idolatry. This is idol worship, idol magic, in fact. And they're using the hand symbols, the arm symbols that would be used by the initiates of the OTO. No coincidence. So I'm suggesting that this is a magical rite, just as and you know what, now that I think about it, I think we could probably even correlate this with George Floyd, which was all a ritual anyway. Because if you remember, he's killed at 8:46, and we talk about this. 9/11 starts at 8:46. He's suffocated, asphyxiated for 8 minutes, 46 seconds. But the sun set at 8:46. Set kills the sun at sunset. So the 8:46 correlation between like the Twin Cities killing of Floyd, 9/11, and the sun setting, what you're seeing there is Floyd in the role of the Sun King who's now dead. And this is all in that summer. So the role of the dead Sun King, he had 4 funerals with a golden casket. All of this stuff is just sun worship. And this is the part of the ceremony where he's dead. So nothing new here, although I find the topic of idol worship to be very intriguing, and I find it to be very revealing as well, and I think also very vindicating to find out that the Babylon working with Marjorie Cameron that we talk about so often, that it definitely is connected to not only the space program and the occult and all that, but to Kenneth Anger, who actually recruited the actress Marjorie Cameron for his movie Inauguration of the Pleasure Dome. I found quite a lot in my research in the last few days that show unequivocally that these are definitely indicators that this secret religion of the elite is mainstream. Even her role in Suicide Squad, Margot Robbie, Suicide Squad is very relevant here because you're talking about what? A bombshell. What killed Jack Parsons? Jack Parsons was with the Suicide Squad. His whole rocket crew was called the Suicide Squad. She's in a movie called Suicide Squad. He's the high priest. Remember, Jack Parsons was the beast in that ritual, where it's Beast and the Babylon. So for the beast to blow up in his laboratory, to be blown up by a bomb, is all euphemism for when he had his mind blown by Marjorie Cameron. It's all euphemistic, and I don't even think he died. The age 37 is also notable, but anyway, one other point here, because I kind of gloss over this because it's gross, but Alfred Kinsey hanging out here with Kenneth Anger, again, a central figure in all of these various psychodramas, very relevant here that he would be in Aleister Crowley's sex dungeon for research material that went into this new paradigm that we call the sexual revolution. Like they quite literally went into the dungeons of Satanism in order to get information to into their research to somehow validate this new way of whatever you want to call it, this new world. And I think again, I called my review Portal to Babylon, but Babylon, Babylon, obviously, because ultimately we're looking at a paradigm shifting act of iconoclasm. In fact, I would even say when the little girls at the beginning were dashing the baby dolls' heads on the rocks, I mean, that's perfectly an example of iconoclasm, which means destroying an icon. The baby as the unit of value or like human survival is the nuclear family. But no, we kind of divorced from that. Like I was saying, in the future, men will be kin, superfluous. They have no reproductive function in Barbie land. Why would they in the future America Babylon? Pengu33 says a total of 19 people have been charged in the case of attempted electoral fraud in the U.S. state of Georgia during the 2020 election. Now, did they keep the Kraken, Lindsay Powell, or did they release her? Now, she was the first time. Look, when they started talking about the Kraken, it was always with her. That's when that meme really started getting, like, more or less force memed into society. Release the Kraken, Kraken Sidney Powell overturning the election. There are a few others that I think are conspicuously absent. Like, I'm really surprised that Roger Stone and Code Monkey Z aren't being charged. Like, those are some of the key figures in this. There are quite a few people I think who also need to be looked into. Like, for example, Marcus Goldfinch, George News. So many instigators, major league instigators. Anyway, thank you for joining. This is Lucifer Tim.